We're back. It's the award-winning Gadget Cast, where we have given each other awards. And then, of course, Greg fumbles the ball at the finish line by throwing his audio up. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good. But are we supposed to be recording?
No, not yet.
Okay.
Did I do the countdown? Are you new to this podcast? This is a new thing for you?
No, but the procedures are a little different this week. And I was supposed to hit record. Travis said it was going straight into it. So,
well, in fairness, like I had started the countdown before I had started the live stream. I realized like halfway through I had to hit live. So, these things happen. Anyway, what's going on, everybody? Hope everyone's good. We're going to wait a couple minutes and then we're going to go right in. Actually, we're not going to wait that long at all because we have all types of people talking.
Like 30 seconds. So if you and your friends usually gather like 50,000 of you every week to watch the show,
let's do the countdown again. No, I'm just kidding.
Let's restart this. You know what?
Let's do the real countdown. That is basically the most you're going to see of me today because the rest of it's going to be everybody else. I have very little to say today, ladies and gentlemen. So we're going
I don't believe that. Travis always has a lot to say.
All right, well, let's start adding people. We'll introduce them each, and then we'll start recording after we get everyone in. Does that sound okay?
Yes.
I mean, I guess it doesn't matter if it sounds okay or not because it is what it is. Hey, everybody, welcome. We try to get all these up as quickly as possible. Okay. Let's go. Number one, he has been a multi-time person who's been on the stream. Last week he was on the stream. He wanted to come back for some reason. He is Luke Miani.
Hello, everyone. What's up? It's me, Casual Luke. I'm coming to you from my remote television studio, also known as a bedroom in my parents' house. It's good to be back.
Always awesome to have you.
Yeah, nice to have you. Are we going to have to do two separate intros? Because
nah. I mean, they're just going to come in and it'll mute, and then we're going to record it, and then we're going to...
I guess the audio intro.
Right, okay, Luke is gone. Let's start it up, okay?
Good take, Luke. Remember all that for the second time.
Yeah. All right, ready? Duke Miami in the house. We appreciate him. He's going to do it again, though. He did such a good job. He's going to do the same time. Here we go.
Rehearse the line one more time and come in a little bit better.
Right. Okay. With more feeling from the heart, from the chest. All right. Ready? Recording Gadget Cast in 3, 2, 1. Record.
Discovery's 4 computers now have primary control of critical vehicle functions.
3, 2, 1, 0, 0.
Hello, world, and welcome to the super mega show of the Gadget Cast. You're not going to believe it. My name is Gregory McFadden, joined always by my host, Travis M.C.P.
Space travel.
If they don't believe it, then they didn't read the title. I'm just going to go ahead and say that right now because they better believe it because it says.
No, I think we have a large listener base that doesn't know how to read. Because it's an audio show, it's not required. So
I'm pretty certain, based on the first day downloads of the audio podcast, most people don't read; they just hit download.
Yeah, well, I'm if you don't know how to read, I think it's fine. I'm pro illiteracy. Travis has a different take. I respect it. I don't agree with him, but that's how it is.
Indeed. Well, let's not fart around here. I mean, I don't have a lot to say other than, ladies and gentlemen, we have a super ridiculous group of people coming in today. So let's start with the man who was here last week. If you had a good time listening to Luke Miani, I call him Miami. Sometimes I call him Miami. Sometimes I call him Duke Miami. I call him everything but his real name, Luke Miani, because then it's not as fun. He is Luke. He's back with us. Welcome.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am coming to you from my remote television broadcast studio, also known as a bedroom in my parents' house.
Nailed it.
Yeah.
Really good.
That was the first time we tried that.
That was the first time I just came up with that, and I have never said those words ever before.
Never. This is why
I've never heard them.
Checking
this
out.
This is why I'm a professional.
A professional YouTuber. You should be on youtube.com/GadgetCast checking us out. Links for all of these gentlemen's YouTube channels are in the description below and, of course, in the show notes. But next up, he is not your all the time. He's your everyday dad. Gary, what's going on? Everyday dad.
Hey, sorry, I'm still laughing at the Duke Miami thing. But no, hey, thanks for having me, guys. Welcome to be here. I will say, you guys will be getting a very strongly worded. You will be getting a strongly worded letter from my agent. It's not uncapitalized the, it's capitalized the Everyday Dad.
Wait.
Angry emails coming.
Well, put it this way: it was worded a couple ways because every day was 2 words briefly with a capital D. We were trying everything. Our marketing department was just trying to see if we can get a couple extra views by doing
Well,
that.
I try to change it up just so I can catch people. You know,
You caught us. You caught us.
The resources are vast. They are unlimited. We are ready to pursue every legal avenue if we have to.
This is true. As you've seen, we were able to win the election through President Greg.
True. Still no official winner. Could be me. Could be. Based on the evidence, it could be me. So
totally good. It's no longer Kanye. We knew that. All right.
I heard a lot of votes got switched away from Greg. So I think that's a really big problem in our society.
There's a lot of people in the streets chanting "Stop the Steal." I think that's about me. I'm not 100% sure. So
it definitely is.
Well, one person who certainly doesn't care anything about that is an OG, and we give him tons of respect. He is Rene Ritchie. Welcome, Rene, back to the show for the first time. I got a lot of people asking for you to come back.
Oh, awesome. Well, I am also coming from a remote studio in an alternate room in Duke Miami's parents' house. His everyday is the capital T, the Everyday Dad room, just down the hall.
Well, we have 3 really, I say 3 because I'm not counting Greg, of the top Apple YouTube channels.
fair point.
That are reporting on all the things. Actually, Greg's done a great job this week as well. And we're going to be talking about the M1 Max. A lot of things happened this week. Finally, we have a lot of non-leaked kind of in real world usage. I've seen a lot of tweets from all 3 of you gentlemen, actually all 4 of you, about different aspects of the M1 Max. I personally put out a video the other day about an interesting kind of a thing that happened to Zone of Tech. We're going to get into all of that stuff, but let's start from the top.
I couldn't see it because my Mac was bricked.
Yes, exactly. I was talking from my brick Mac. No, Greg, you're going to have to carry this because I don't know a lot about. I don't have one of these yet. I have been considering the Mac Mini. I saw your video come out. I watched your video, Greg.
Yeah. So, this isn't really a gadget cast. The audience is completely fake. This is more of an intervention. We're all here to tell you, buy an Apple Silicon Mac, and we're just wondering why you haven't yet.
I want to say that I'm kind of close. I think the one thing that kept me from getting the Air was the price, but the price of the Mini is really very, very
amazing.
Yes,
It's price per port.
It is.
Yeah, I think if you don't order a Mac Mini by the end of the show, I think all 4 of us have failed.
Greg will concede if you don't order.
Yeah, I will concede.
Yikes!
All right.
Well, Greg, I'm going to make the mistake of having you just go ahead and take over this whole thing and move us in the directions that we need to go. Everyone, keep your fingers crossed. GadgetCast has just gone to Greg. Let's see. Hashtag guard. Let's go.
Thank you. So, like Travis said, the M1 Max, they're here. They're real. We've been using them since Tuesday. Rene, probably a little bit longer. Actually, Gary, you got the Mac Mini too, so you've been using it longer. But they're here. There's been so much speculation. A lot of us have been waiting for this moment to talk about them for years, quite frankly. We kind of knew that Apple would be eventually moving over to their own chips. We kind of felt that. They confirmed that at their Worldwide Developers Conference, and we've just been kind of waiting for this moment before the year ended. And now they're actually in our hands. Now, I guess we can go kind of around the room and talk about it to kind of keep it more structured. But just like your first impressions of this Mac, I want to start with Luke. What did you think? Like, we saw the Geek Benches, we saw the results, but like when you actually started using some of these machines, how did you feel about it?
I mean, honestly, the first thing that I noticed was probably when I fired up Cinebench. That was like the first thing that I did because I just wanted to see Cinebench running on. I think I did the Air first because that was the first video that I worked on. And just the amazement at how cool it was. I think, honestly, legitimately temperatures was the most impressive thing. Even if the performance was the same as Intel, just the fact that it's in a fanless MacBook, just the fact that it's in a MacBook Pro that has a fan, but you wouldn't know because you'll never hear it, that alone is huge. So many of my friends who are not heavy users, people, even a couple of friends that I have with like a 16-inch MacBook Pro, which is far above what you actually need if you're just doing like documents, answering emails, doing remote work. You don't need a 16-inch MacBook Pro. You don't need a ton of power for that. But even with those simple tasks, people are like, oh man, my MacBook gets really hot, or after 30 minutes, the fans are going crazy. And that is done. It's over. That does not happen anymore. And it's unbelievable.
Yeah, that, we'll talk about this more, but I think that's one of my big takeaways from all of this is there used to be that thing when you recommend any of these Apple laptops from previous generations, and there was always that lower end Air. And it was always like, yeah, it's fine if you're a light user, but if you start going towards that middle ground of someone who's in between, a light user and a pro user, you start to have to you have to have that difficult conversation with them about maybe spending a little bit more money. I don't think that's the case anymore. What do you think, Gary? You're Gary and I have been talking a lot privately. I think he's a big fan of the MacBook Air.
I'm just blown away by the whole line. I would say that the thing that surprised me the most is not necessarily the power, because I think Apple computers, even before this version of the MacBook Pro came out, I've been a big supporter, and I recommend the MacBook Pro 13 for years now. But the battery life is unreal. So, for example, last night I unplugged my MacBook Pro 13. I went up to go work on my computer to type some scripts for YouTube, to just do some general like clerical work. I spent an hour doing that, and then I checked the battery percentage on my computer. It was 98%. For an hour of work, 98%. Normally I don't get wrapped around the wheel about battery life, but this has been shocking. And much like the iPad, when you close the lid or it's powered off, it loses almost zero battery life. So it lasts for, I don't know, just like my initial impression is what it's crazy stuff.
Yeah, no, definitely seeing similar results. Now, Rene, I know you've been waiting particularly for this, and I know you've probably read every single piece of information on the M1 Max, but like first impressions, like as you first started using them, were you like in disbelief?
I cannot believe the bias of these hand-selected Apple reviewers. I have been trying to install WinZip for 4 days, and you're just completely lying to people. They're not going to be able to run any of their Linux applications natively on these boxes. And no, I can't do it. I can't even do it. I can't even make fun of it. That was for you. No, I'm just kidding. The thing for me was, even before I ran anything, like you want to open them up and you want to check everything immediately, but the thing that hit me right away is that it feels like an iPad. It's just so immediately responsive. And not to say like Intel's were fine. Like if you did one thing, it was fine, but just the amount of times an app will bounce before it launches, how fast the windows come up, when you're changing states, how quickly that goes. I know Greg managed to beach ball it because Greg, but I still haven't been able to beach ball. And I've been trying. It took me forever to get the fans to come up. It was just everything that everyone's always, why can't I just run Mac OS on my iPad? And I think a large part of that was because of how responsive the iPads are. Like, set aside the touchscreen for a second, they are just so immediately responsive. And the Mac now has that. And that to me is quality of life changing, because the battery life is great. But now just editing a video, I get, 5 minutes of my life back, and that all stacks up. And like, you don't realize how much those little interruptions and waiting periods add up until you don't have them anymore. And then it just feels like, someone made the world a slightly better place.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up about the responsiveness of the system on these M1 chips. It is. I'm sitting here on an Intel iMac to do the show. I kind of didn't want to mess anything up plugging it into the M1 Mac. I kind of got really paranoid at the end of it. Let me just be safe. We got so many guests on. Let me do it on the old machine that works. But like first thing I do is I sit down here. I've been pretty much using the M1 Max all week, either the Mini, the Air, or the new Pro. I sit down, I go to open up an application, and you just watch it bounce and bounce and bounce, and you almost don't even realize how fast the new ones are. You get so used to it. And then I heard the fans whirl up and everything, and it's just like, I just can't wait to get off this machine and go back to it, which is crazy because this is almost a $4,000 computer. And I think the really telling thing is these are entry-level machines. Now, Luke, I saw you like talking about this on Twitter a lot. There's people that are upset because, you know, these machines, I think they're performing above at least my expectations. But there's people that are kind of like, well, you know, they didn't upgrade the Pro models, so I don't know if I should get these ones.
Well, do you mean like in terms of the design, or do you just mean in terms of the fact that the Air and the Pro have the same chip?
Well, I think it's more of a design thing, and I think it's also more of, you know, these are the entry level. There's still the 4-port MacBook Pro that they didn't upgrade. There's still the 16-inch version. We still have, you know, iMacs and stuff like that. Every Mac that they upgraded, even the Mini, they brought back the silver color, I think, to kind of go, you know, this is the entry level model Mini that we used to have. But there's a lot of people out there who I think, I don't know, there's this cross section of, I think they're mostly average users who almost don't believe the power, maybe wanted that redesign, and they're kind of hung up on that. I've seen some of that.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think when you have an entry level product like this, people, like, on the one hand, I think there's sort of two different things going on. All right. So I think on the one hand, some people look at the performance and they get sort of shell shocked by that kind of performance. And then they expect that the entire machine is operating at a higher level. So they see the base model MacBook Pro outperforming the base model 16-inch MacBook Pro. Like the Core i7 16-inch MacBook Pro, pretty handily beat by the M1, at least in terms of CPU. So they see that kind of performance and they say, oh, well, why can't we get more ports? Why can't we get multiple displays? Why can't we get 32 gigs of RAM? And then the same thing with the Mac Mini. They say, okay, well, why is this limited to 16 gigabytes? Why is there only 2 Thunderbolt ports? And I think it's because they're so powerful that people are kind of forgetting about the fact that they're the absolute base model, lowest end computers that Apple sells. I mean, they're not in terms of performance because they're outperforming so much, but in terms of their pricing and their categories,
but they're new.
I
must have them. They're new. Exactly. I must have them. Everything new must be for me.
Everything new must be the best, right? It can't ever be an incremental improvement. And then I think the other thing that's happening is people kind of look at this, and because it's Apple, they don't have necessarily a frame of reference. So it's a lot more easy when I feel like it's easy for people to say, oh, my gaming PC is better than that because I have your M1 chip doesn't outperform my mid-range $200 Core i5, so therefore it's not that good. It's like, okay, you might be right, but your Core i5 is not a fanless 10-watt MacBook Air with 18 hours of battery life. So it's not accomplishing the same task.
My F-150 tows more than your stupid Model 3.
Yeah, exactly.
I saw someone on Twitter. I don't remember exactly who it was. They were replying to someone else's tweet. It might even been with someone here where they were talking about the performance. And then they said, well, it's not as good as my laptop that does this, and this. And they were like, well, how much is that? They were like $5,000. Like, yeah.
And if you unplug it doesn't do any of that anymore.
Like, and your point is, I mean, it was the weirdest kind of rationalization of why it's not the impressive part. And I explained this in the video I did. I'm like, look, it's able to do this at this wattage draw. That is what's impressive. It's dominating processors that it should not be able to dominate, regardless if that's top. No one's saying it's the top processor out there. No one's saying that. But watt for watt, it is very difficult to beat this thing. And considering that this is the beginning, it's an exciting future. And even if you aren't into, Apple and iOS and so on, this is exciting because it's going to put a fire under Intel and AMD to do the same thing on their side of the fence, because there's no way they can sit there and let Apple come in and go, listen, we're eating your lunch. Thank you for, paving the way. Now we're going to take all your customers. It's not going to happen. So this
perfect Travis metaphor. They're putting Hoyce in the first UFC, not Hickson.
Exactly. We got to put them out there, get people interested, and it's going to be a good thing. I'm actually super excited for everybody. I mean, I think there's a great, it's great for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a good play to go with the MacBook Pro 13 and the MacBook Air first. They're like the least scary computers Apple makes. So if you're gonna make some kind of big change to it, make it to the least scary computer. So let's say something does happen. Nobody cares if the MacBook Air is not a powerhouse or something. If maybe there's, you release a 7-core GPU as opposed to an 8-core GPU, but it's the low end, so there's less risk. They'll probably sell more of them just because it's the low end. But yeah, I mean, I agree. I think the price to performance they're not even necessarily playing the same game as the Intel MacBooks are. Sure, the power, if we're talking about the MacBook Pro 16 to the new MacBook Pro 13, I think both excel in different ways because not everything's transitioned over to the Apple Silicon or through the ARM architecture yet. But if you buy a M1 today, it will get better over time as more things transition over to it. Like if you look at the first party software, like obviously most of us on YouTube are video editors as at least a hobby. Final Cut Pro is performing vastly better than my MacBook Pro 16 on the 13. And that's just going to get better and better as more programs, transition over to it, which is the crazy part.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of conversation on Twitter from people who use Macs every day. And we're not even talking about just Mac laptops, desktops. And again, in my case, the iMac, I'm seeing better export times on a MacBook Air. That shouldn't even be in the conversation. The MacBook Air should not be exporting better than my desktop, but it is. And you're even seeing that with Mac Pro users going to Mac Mini. It's certain things, the optimization that Apple is able to achieve on these M1 chips with their codecs and optimize that for Final Cut. Gary, like the Sony footage, the Sony AS7 III, it's super hard to work with. And then all of a sudden you put it in this M1 Mac and it's going through the timeline like butter. Now, not everyone's a video editor, and not everyone even needs that much power. The vast majority of people out there, they're gonna like that the computers don't get hot anymore. They're gonna like that there's no fan whirling up. They're gonna like that they can take this laptop, maybe not plug it in for the entire week and be fine with it. And it's just incredible what Apple was able to do with these M1 chips, from power efficiency to power. And I knew the power efficiency would be there because they have that on iPhone and iPad. But to see the power jump in this first generation especially, I still can't get over it. I just still can't get over it.
Yeah, Apple... Oh,
sorry,
go ahead, Luke.
Oh, all right, I'll go. I mean, there's endless use cases for where these things are beneficial. I'm proving one right now. I'm using the M1 MacBook Pro to do this stream right now. And I've streamed from MacBooks before, and it was a horrible experience. Even with Streamlabs, which isn't or StreamYard, which isn't a particularly demanding, it runs in a browser. But the 16-inch MacBook Pro fans start whirling around this point. I've been on here for over half an hour, I think. Yeah, about half an hour we've been on here. I'm just feeling it's not warm. It's not even warm. Much less having a fan whirling. My 16-inch MacBook Pro at this point, even my iMac, I normally stream from a 2020 iMac. Fans are going. Well, fan is going. But right now, there's nothing. So if you're working in a recording booth, working at anything with audio, having a silent Mac is absolutely a benefit. Not to mention the fact that it's vastly more powerful. I was deeply embarrassed by the fact that when I was testing the $700 Mac Mini and I was doing my render test with uncompressed 10-bit footage, it rendered in exactly the same time, literally exactly the same, down to the second, as my 18-core iMac Pro with Vega 64 and 128 gigabytes of RAM. The cheapest Mac that you could buy was identical to an iMac Pro that, when it was new, had a price of $10,400.
But stupid Mac Mini won't keep your coffee warm anymore. Apple totally ruined it.
You're right.
Yeah, my hands are cold now.
It's garbage.
Yes.
If Apple were to come out, like, let's say next week Apple's like, JK, everybody, JK, there is no fan in the MacBook Pro 13. I wouldn't be surprised because I still haven't heard the darn thing turn on.
It's the same one as it has been.
I did it with the 30-minute Cinebench multiple run that managed to turn it on very, very low. Like, you had to put your head next to it to hear it.
Yeah. I've heard it. I've done that. You can kind of feel the airflow against your cheek. after like 20 minutes. It's crazy.
And then the air has throttled down like maybe 5%.
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
Yeah, let's real quick answer the big elephant in the room. And I don't care who answers this, because you're all going to say the same thing. I think almost all of you have done a video about this. 8 gig versus 16 gig RAM or Mac.
Nobody's asked that question.
I can't answer that question. I have to direct you to my director of unified memory management. I can't.
You're dumb.
Oh, you're a unified guy.
Yep, not today. Not today, Travis.
Or even Air versus Pro. I mean, I think I've seen almost all of your videos about this. So I'm just curious, what is it? Because they're fairly close in price, and once upon a time it was a processor difference, among other things, like the little touch bar and everything. But who think they can definitively say which a person should buy depending on what their needs were? Look, everyone in the chat is like, yeah, I knew this was coming.
I would say I'll take a stab at it. If you're just looking to get into Mac OS for the first time ever, I would say the Mac Mini. It's for $700, it gives you everything that a Mac user could need. Plus, it's got a lot of nice I/O built into the back of it. If you need a laptop, that's where it gets kind of, I don't know. I really thought that the MacBook Pro 13 was going to be the computer to beat, but I am shocked at how good the MacBook Air is. Especially if you're not going to be a power user doing things like Cinebench tests, or you're doing a lot of video rendering, though the MacBook Air is a phenomenal video editing machine. I think that at $1,000 is I still don't have a good answer for you, but I would say, long story long, Mac Mini.
I would say for a MacBook, because I think there's probably more people shopping for MacBooks than the Mac Mini. The Mac Mini, I'm sure, will sell very well, but most people are probably confounded by the choice between the Air and the Pro. I made a video. This was the big video that I worked on because I thought it was a really good question. And basically, I guess it boils down to start with the Air, because that, is 90% of what you're looking for. And then it comes down to what more do you want? A little bit more battery life. A little bit more performance, because the MacBook Pro does perform better than the Air. It has a greater thermal allowance, so it's able to run faster. It's able to run longer. So if those are useful, I don't think anyone is shopping going, oh, I really want the touch bar, but it's there also. Also, you got a little bit brighter display, but again, I don't think that's going to be a real sticking point for most people. So for people that are doing like serious video editing, it might be worth stepping up to the MacBook Pro. But if you don't need the power, the extra battery life, and a little bit of extra power, but you're okay with spending the money, just put more into storage and RAM in the MacBook Air. I think the Air is the default.
I can give you a smart ass answer, and that is if you know what memory pressure and performance throttling are, get the MacBook Pro with 16 gigs and at least a terabyte. Because if you're opening up Activity Monitor to see when you're swapping, because you won't be able to tell unless you actually go look. The swap is so fast. But I have the 8 gigabyte, 256 gigabyte Mac Mini, and I can make it cry. Like I with just render tests, I can make it cry. So if you think you're going to be doing anything that will put pressure on memory and will throttle thermally, and you know what those things are, get the most Mac you can. It's the same answer as the Intel ones.
Yeah. Also, if
magic.
you're in that position, it might also be worth waiting until the next batch that's a little bit more high end.
Oh, can I quote Greg? Because I made a joke that, everyone sees the great new shoes and they want to try to fit their feet into them, even if they're two sizes too small. And Greg says, yeah, at least these shoes don't burn my feet.
Well, I got one off. Look at that.
Listen, that's a very interesting thing to talk about, because you saw this initial flux of everyone getting their M1 Max. And for the creators who have them, listen, we've just been singing their praises, and I think rightfully so. But then you also see this second tier of people who probably weren't even thinking about getting one of these machines. They're probably looking at it going, these are the entry-level models. I'll wait for the new, 16-inch MacBook Pro, the new iMac, and then that's where I'll replace my machine. But we're seeing a lot of people, I think a lot of us are fortunate. We probably get the latest laptop every year. We review it. But you're seeing a lot of people with 2016 machines, 2015 machines, 2014 machines. And they were planning to get something bigger and beefier because that's what they used to have to get in the past to even do what they're doing on their computer. Now you see it, though. You see this influx of people going, wait a minute, these machines are performing at this level at this price point. Now, normally I would be that 16-inch MacBook Pro customer, but there's this sense, I feel it in the community. I'm missing out. I need to go and get one of these today.
I really want a 16-inch Air, but I'll settle for a 13-inch Air for now.
Exactly. You're seeing this. You're seeing people rush out and get it, and I see it with the ship times on these Macs, especially the 16 gigabyte model. If you go to look for like the Mac Mini, that's out until December. So after Christmas, oh, you still haven't opened it. Right?
I still haven't opened this yet.
Mac Mini, you
bought them all.
Maybe that's something you sell. No.
Building little towers in his basement with them.
Yeah. but it I would like to get everyone's expertise here. Like, does someone go out and buy one of these machines today, or should they wait for the one they want, the iMac or 16-inch MacBook Pro, or even the 4-port 13-inch MacBook Pro, which I think is kind of like the true MacBook Pro?
If it's for fun, like if you just are like, if you have the money and you just want to play with M1 Max, just get whatever you want. But if you're working in production, if you're working in enterprise, if you're working in anything where it's mission critical, I wouldn't even update to Big Sur for a few months, let alone an entirely new hardware platform. And I think a lot of the people who are tweeting about pain that they're suffering, like again, like that WinZip joke, it's just like, you should not be running this now. Your IT administrator is going to come and take it away from you, slap your hand, and send you to the corner. But if you just want to have fun, go have fun. And if you just have really light use cases and you would buy an Air anyway, you can get even more out of an Air than you ever would before. So I think that's it. Like the Air is bonus. It's like frosting at this point. But if you need big production gear, it's not magic. There's no magic going on here. It's just really good silicon.
I mean, I think there is a little bit of magic going on because I always, like I said, 13-inch MacBook Pro. It was my very first Mac. It's the one that if I'm doing anything, I have my MacBook Pro 13. And the only reason I have a 16 is I needed to have the 16 to get the kind of power to not have to spend all day rendering when I would use the MacBook Pro 13. So now that I can have the MacBook Pro 13 with comparable and faster render times or just fantastic performance, better than the MacBook Pro 16 when we talk about high efficiency files. The Mac, and I try to not speak in hyperbolic terms, but these new M1 chips have absolutely, like, as of the second I bought them, they've halved my storage cost because now I shoot everything in high efficiency because they have no problems running it. So my SD cards now, I don't need to buy the big fancy ones because I get to shoot in a lower bit rate for the same quality. I mean, I'm very impressed at what they've been able to squeeze out of these processors. Maybe if you need more external display port or external display support, yes, wait for a model that does more than one. But if you do need like to save some money on even just to buy one is like a high efficiency, I don't know, transcoder. These things are shockingly capable for files that used to grind my computer to a halt.
My codec is still Rosetta. Womp
womp. Real quick, for anyone who's just joined us, I see a whole bunch of people just, I think it's because we're on multiple platforms, so we're doing pretty good here with all the people. I just wanted to mention that if you are new to any of these gentlemen, links are in the description of the YouTube stream below. Obviously, if you're listening to the podcast, you already know that because you've been listening the entire time like a good GadgetCast listener. We appreciate you greatly. And anyone in the chat, I noticed there's some really great questions coming in. We're going to save it for Aftercast. We'll do a couple of Q&As there at the end, so hold on to your questions. We will get to them.
Yes. I want to ask Luke a more specific question because this is more geared towards him. Luke, obviously, if you haven't visited his channel, he does a lot of like use Macs, how to get deals on Macs, all like these great videos going over this. Now, how does this change your content going forward? Because we were kind of talking about this privately. We were going over these results of like, oh, look at this new MacBook Air. Even if you could get an old Intel MacBook Air, $700, $800 off, is that something anyone should do? Should people even be looking at older Macs at this point, or should people just have their eye going forward on M1?
So without wanting to spoil too much, because I also thought about that, and I've got videos scheduled discussing whether or not people should sell their Intel MacBook Pros or whether they should buy a used Intel Mac in late 2020. So I've got videos for those that'll explain at length coming out this week. But basically, my career is in shambles because I have made a name for myself. However you want to describe that name as Duke Miami.
However
perhaps.
ignominious that name.
Yeah. Of basically just buying used to get a good deal. And that is very hard to do right now. I mean, for one, I think we're going to have to wait and see a little bit because it's sort of similar to what happened with the graphics card market when the RTX 3000 series came out, where it was like, okay, you'd have to be an idiot to spend $800 for an RTX 2080 Ti, right? Because you could, I mean, if you can actually get a 3070, it's less. Yeah, I'm still not convinced that they actually exist, but in theory, why would you spend more for worse? And that's basically what's happening right now. I mean, the 13-inch Intel MacBook Pros are still going for $1,000. That is a horrible deal. That is a horrible deal. I would rather saw off my own foot than pay $1,000 for a 2020 Intel MacBook Pro right now. Yeah, Tuesday's video, I actually do saw off my own foot. That's a spoiler alert. You'll have to tune in to see. But yeah, no, it's going to be tricky. There were a few situations that I came across in doing research. I saw a couple Core i9 15-inch MacBook Pros, the 2019 ones with the 8 cores, sort of creeping down to $1,400. Once you get down to $1,300 for the Core i9 plus 32 gigs of RAM, a terabyte SSD, then you can start to have that conversation. But the other thing that's crazy is I ran Cinebench R23 on a 2019 fully decked out MacBook Pro, and it's basically exactly the same as the M1. So it's going to be very, very hard to find a good deal. Now, that doesn't apply to the low end stuff because, right, we're sitting here talking from the position of tech YouTubers who can go out and buy and test these things because we're doing arguably a public service. Also, probably we're just having fun with it because this is what we like to do. But for a lot of people, you know, even $700 for the Mac Mini, that's still a good chunk of change. And so if you're shopping for a Mac with a $500 budget, you might be going, okay, cool, but that does not apply to me. $1,000 MacBook Air is twice what I want to spend, so I don't care how good it is, it's not going to happen. And I think the big thing to remember is that even though the deals might not be as good as they were, even though the performance per dollar might not be as good as they were, previous Macs are not overnight completely useless. They're still good. You can still use an early 2015 13-inch MacBook Pro.
Tim Cook is not coming to your house and destroying it with a baseball bat.
Yeah, it's gonna be okay.
True. We've been kind of praising them. So, is there any negatives you found? I think Rene was mentioning, like, you know, maybe some legacy programs aren't really working. The big one I can think of is, like, you know, Macs were never known for gaming, but you could have got a kind of decent graphics card on a Mac and you could boot into Windows and get access to all those games. I think that's probably one of the biggest regressions for me moving over to these M1 Macs. You know, Windows maybe comes on Boot Camp if they ever do the ARM version for the Mac. I think it's basically up to Windows at this point. But even then, who knows how well games run on it. So I would say that's probably the biggest regression for me that I've seen with these M1 Macs. What about you guys?
So I'm just loading up a Linus video. Give me a second.
World of Warcraft works great.
Well, there you go. That's the only game that matters.
That's all you need. That's all you need.
Minecraft works well too, even on the MacBook Air. Doesn't even get hot. I think the biggest regression is probably something that we're not going to fully understand for a couple of years, and that's repair. Because I suspect that these things are going to be an absolute nightmare to recycle and repair and reuse. We've already seen since 2016, it's just been like this relentless war on being able to repair parts and replace components yourself. You already can't do anything about storage or RAM for most Macs that are out there. That's kind of a done deal. But the fact that these things are so locked down, the fact that it's all tied onto that chip. So basically, you'll end up with the iPhone situation where if it's iCloud locked, it's a brick. And these are going to be significantly more expensive than that. So that I do worry about repair.
They're computing appliances now. They're not traditional computers anymore.
Yeah.
I wonder how reliable these machines will be, though. Speaking of repair, I'm sure they will be harder, but I do wonder because there's so much less heat being pumped into, by these chips and stuff like that. And things like battery capacity too. You use a MacBook for a while and you drain that battery plugging it in all the time. They can go pretty quickly. But with these ones, you don't have to plug them in all that often. So I do wonder what the longevity of these will be like. But you're right. I think these are going to be super hard to repair in the future.
Craig did clearly have an iFixit kit on his desk. They must be testing for all of that stuff.
He did. Yeah, I think in terms of, I think they will be more reliable than Intel Macs. There haven't been too many hugely problematic, at least on a board level. We had like the display issue, the butterfly keyboard issue. So stuff like that could potentially be a problem. But in terms of like logic board failure, I would expect these things to be pretty solid. I don't know of any real issues with iPads in terms of reliability, and that's basically what they are at this point. So I don't think that's going to be a problem. I'm talking more about like when you get to people in 4 years that recycle their technology, but they don't sign out of iCloud when they get rid of it. And then you're essentially condemning that computer to death when it could have lived another life with someone else. That's where I think the main issue is going to be, similar to with iPhones.
Yes. For those of you that don't know, I don't think we mentioned this on the audio show, or if you come and watch on YouTube, Luke is actually using the MacBook's webcam. So
yeah, what do you think?
I honestly think it looks pretty good, but yeah, I don't know. I'm surprised you're on the MacBook's webcam. So I think
it's a small little icon. Maybe if it was a larger,
small.
If I wasn't so small here, maybe
yeah,
it would have been a little bit chunky.
I think they're still pretty bad. I was doing my own testing. If you give it enough light, they're okay, honestly. But not everyone has the greatest lighting situation, where I think that's where it starts to fall apart. But I see you on it right now. It's good enough to do this show.
It's fine.
I think people would be fine doing a web.
It's a potato with cheese and bacon and sour cream. It's just a fully loaded potato.
Yeah.
Now.
That's all you need. That's all you need. But John Gruber was on TV and he said he was using it, and that's where I was like, oh wow, he's actually using that, and like, you're on TV. I think that's about as high as you can go.
Just doing that to troll Joanna.
Oh, that reminds me, I'm on TV tomorrow. I forgot all about that. That just goes to show. We'll do that at the end of the show. We'll probably remind me, because I will end this podcast and forget.
Are you going to be on the MacBook webcam when you're on TV?
No.
Oh man. But yeah. Going back, I really haven't seen too many problems, surprisingly, too, because don't forget, a lot of the software isn't native to the M1 chip. It's still running through some sort of translation layer through Rosetta 2, and at worst, they kind of run like they did on Intel, and that's not necessarily a huge thing. Like, if they work just like they did last generation, you really don't notice it. Obviously, for the ones that are optimized, they do load up quicker. But if you're meeting or sometimes exceeding last generation performance on these older apps, it's not really going to be a problem. And I was surprised that they were able to handle this chip transition very well, I think.
That was something that I was kind of worried about after, because I've never used a Windows ARM machine, and I'm not much into the technical aspects of the computer or the logic board, but I was concerned listening to people talk about how bad the transition for an ARM-based Windows machine was with compatibility issues. And so when we started talking about Apple Silicon, I was getting kind of nervous that maybe there could be I imagined within a few months it would have been worked through. But the thing that surprised me the most, besides the battery life, is just how well everything has worked so far. Now, I haven't tried every single program in existence, but the ones that I have used, things like Photoshop that hasn't yet fully transitioned over to their M1 version, like even that running in Rosetta is working perfectly fine. Like, I was concerned that I was going to have to keep using my Intel Macs while I transitioned everything over into the M1. But all I had to do was plug it in, and it's just been working.
There are some salty Microsoft people on Twitter who are just posting images of their niche enterprise applications that either aren't installing or are grinding. And of course, anything that is Electron will give you the same wonderful power efficiency as that you've always enjoyed on an Electron app.
Yeah. Let me think. We were talking about unified memory. Now, going more towards the future. I was reading this Ars Technica piece. They actually had like an interview. It was really good. But they were talking about how, a lot of people are thinking of these like traditional RAM, like, oh my God, I got to get 16 gigabytes of RAM or this thing's going to fall apart. And the architecture is different enough to where maybe 8 gigabytes might be fine for some people. Certainly, I've been running a lot of heavy stuff on an 8 gigabyte machine, and it's actually been performing pretty well where previous machines would have these bottlenecks. But this unified memory, it's kind of like this one pool of memory that's shared between CPU, GPU. And traditionally, the way I understood it from reading this piece is that, if you have your CPU on one board and you have your GPU on another board, well, they still have to translate and send information back and forth to each other, which kind of slows everything down. One of the reasons why these Silicon Macs are so fast is everything's just on that one pool. It's only going through that one layer, so that kind of speeds everything up. The question I have is, and I don't know if any of us can really answer this that well, but looking towards the future, obviously these are the low-end machines. If you're going to do unified memory, not have a dedicated graphics card, these are the machines to do it on. They weren't going to have dedicated graphics cards anyway. But as we start to look into the future at 16-inch MacBook Pro, iMac, what do you think that looks like? Do they keep using unified memory? Is there a dedicated graphics card? Is there some sort of maybe like an MPX module that we saw on the Mac Pro and that's how they do it? What do you think, Rene?
I think, they were serious when they said that it's going to be a family of SoCs, and typically an SoC has some element of unified memory. Apple has done off-chip memory in iPads before, I think a couple times, but it's always been a unified pool of memory. And like you, I wonder if there will be, expansion accelerators and other things, especially as we get in towards a Mac Pro M system eventually one day. I think just based on those graphs, like they were total Jeff Bezos graphs where they didn't really have anything indicated on them. And you got to assume that they started at 0 because otherwise the nerds get super, super angry. But just assuming that's the case and they got to 10 watts there, it's easy to see where the additional watts go as you start scaling that up. And I think there's just so much headroom. Like the latest big Navi and Ampere cards are like 200 to 300 watts just for the graphics card, with the Shield helicarrier like fans mounted on top of them. And just based on what we're seeing at 10 watts, even if Apple just goes to like 50, 60 watts, I think there's so much headroom for Mac Pros, iMacs, all of those, that they'll be fine with the SoC model until they get to those real big modular machines.
Luke, what do you think?
I think that's a fair assumption. I mean, I'm going to be interested to see. We've heard rumors about a 5 nanometer dedicated chip. So I think they'll end up doing SoCs across the board. And then similar to the way that Intel MacBooks since 2009, I think. No, 2008, the first unibody MacBook Pro was where they introduced the concept of graphics switching. And back then, because they didn't have integrated graphics on Core 2 Duos, the low power card was on the chipset. So there was the 9400M and then the 9600M dedicated chip in the 15-inch MacBook Pro. And then a year later, when the 13-inch came out, they had just the 9400M. So I could see something like that happening here, where think of the M1, the 8-core GPU, as a GeForce 9400M, just for example's sake. It's the integrated chip that comes across the board. With the 16-inch, they'll probably have a dedicated chip that I'm sure will be tightly integrated. I don't know if it'll necessarily be tied into the SoC, but I think I think some people in my comments were wondering if graphics switching, dual graphics MacBook Pros were not going to exist anymore. I think that it's probably likely they will. It'll just be switching between Apple's integrated and Apple's dedicated graphics. As far as the Mac Pro, I've heard some chatter about, obviously this is a long way off, a socketed CPU. So I think it's possible down the road at some point that Apple could end up doing a socketed upgradable Mac Pro. I hope so, because I think the Mac Pro fundamentally needs to be upgradable. That's one of the reasons why the trash can was so bad, because it kind of was against the whole idea of what the Pro level Macs had been for so long. So I think it would be a grave mistake if they were to sacrifice that, even if they're really, really powerful.
Upgradable, but only with our own graphics cards and our own chipset, though.
Right. And I think we talked about this at some point on the show, didn't we? About how, like, at some point, if Apple's selling you the upgrade, then they have an incentive to offer upgradability because they're still making their money. Like, when I upgraded the CPU on my iMac, Apple didn't get their... How much do they charge for their CPU upgrade? Something stupid. They didn't get their $300 from me. Intel got it directly. But if Apple's the one selling the upgrades and making their margins, then I think that's something that they would do. Probably only on the Mac Pro, though.
Kind of curious, between the four of you, there's probably a good couple million views on videos about this product with thousands or so of comments. I'm really interested to hear from each of you what type of comments are kind of the most common. So let's start with Greg and then move all the way around. And like, what are the biggest comments you're seeing from people watching these videos?
8 or 16.
Or yeah.
Yep, basically.
It's so interesting. We didn't even talk about this, but like these are like the first Macs. There's other Macs. I think there's one MacBook Air generation where you only had one Intel chip. But for the most part, you go into the Mac order page and you got 3 different CPU options. You got graphics card options. You go to buy this Mac, and really the only decision besides storage, and everyone kind of knows what that is, it's 8 gigabytes or 16 gigabytes of this unified memory. So this is really the only decision people have to make. It's kind of easier than ever to really pick out one of these Macs. Because you're really only deciding between form factor and then, hey, do I need 8 gigabytes or 16 gigabytes? So that seems to be the biggest question. Obviously, every Mac video you do, people want to know, does it run this very specific program? You do a gaming video, you try and help people out as best you can. You put your games out there, you show them how you run. And, maybe you can compare that to a similar game released in a similar era or whatever. Maybe it runs the same. But people will ask you, does this game run? Does this specific game run? You got to make another video with this specific game. And
a whole video.
It'll be a 30-second video, but you got to make it.
Yeah, exactly.
They would love
to see a 15-minute exploration of the different settings in Minecraft running on specifically the base MacBook Air.
But you can tell how important the RAM question is because nobody's asking about the gold. But usually that's the question. It's like, is it gold enough? Is it enough gold? Is it no more gold?
I do love that question in a video. Which color should I get? It's like
a little pink, actually.
It's blush gold.
But those are really the questions I'm getting. Other than that, I guess the other questions are, should I get this model? Should I wait? And I still see, because these people don't have the machines. They're only judging them based on previous experience and things they've been previously told. There is a lot of question of, hey, can this MacBook Air, can it do this? Is it good for Office or, can it do word processing? And it's like, I'd love to answer it. And I'm like, listen, this thing can do anything you can throw at it, basically. The other ones might just do it faster. But I think if you're asking those questions, there's really no wrong choice. Like if you get the MacBook Air, I think you'll be able to do mostly everything on it that a user would want to do and do it speedy, no fan, all that stuff. But what about you guys? Any random questions that you've got or advice you'd give?
No, same thing. Like, can you please do a test where you're running Emacs in this compatibility mode based on the Berkeley 1937 build? It's incredibly niche, marginalized because everyone really cares about their work case, and they just assume we can make a video for their work case. Which, if I was them, I would assume too. But at a certain point, like I think you got to start making assumptions. I also want to say that life without a fan, like you don't really notice it until it's gone, especially on the Air, because that Air fan almost every MacBook fan was just on constantly, and you learn to draw it out. But it's almost like when the kids leave the house, and just after a few minutes, you realize it's quiet.
There's certain pain points where I know on my previous machines where I know the fan would whirl up, and you just come to expect it. And I'm still like expecting it. I'm still just like, oh, this time it's gonna get hot. I'm gonna have to take this off my lap. And
but it wasn't. It was like, oh, Dropbox is thinking the fan is on.
Oh yeah,
like,
yeah.
I'm going to a future website. The fan is on. Like, it's just.
And for the record, we're over an hour here. Yeah, no, fan's not on.
Are you plugged in? Are you plugged in?
I'm on battery.
I'm plugged in.
So when we started, when did I join this call? It was like
an hour ago.
4:50. I'll call it an hour. I was at 75%. Okay, what are we at now? 67.
That's not bad streaming.
The battery life is unreal. It's
67.
unreal.
I don't even believe you.
8%.
Right.
That's insane.
It's a lot to talk. It's a lot to talk about, and I didn't bring this up too, and I kind of wanted to. You know, laptops, they're supposed to be mobile. They're supposed to be portable. You're supposed to be able to bring it with you. And maybe now is an unfortunate time to kind of talk about this stuff, but you're supposed to be able to bring it with you and get your work done. And it was always kind of like, well, yeah, if you're browsing the web, answering emails, you know, word processing, of course you can bring this along and do it with you. But, you know, for like the stuff we do, and maybe we're a little bit biased here, but I'm sure people run some intensive programs sometimes, it would just drain the battery. You would have to have a power adapter. You'd have to sit near the, AC wall at your coffee shop. And now you kind of don't have to. Every video that I've put out this week, unless I was editing on the Mac Mini, no power cord, just sitting at like my kitchen island, editing a video. And I could never do that before. I would always have to, oh my God, it's 3%. I got to run over and get the power cord. And it changes how you use these machines to almost their ideal state. They're mobile machines.
Well, yeah, I mean, the two things a laptop has to do well, like the power, whatever you can, if you're buying a laptop, you've had to accept that the power will come at a cost of being plugged in. But the two things they have to do well is thermal performance, and it has to have a decent battery life. And the thermal performance on these M1 MacBooks it's indescribably good. Like any other laptop I have, whether it be because I have tons of Windows laptops here, I have tons of Apple laptops. And at some point, like if you're sitting on like the couch, you got a blanket or something, you have to be careful of blocking the vents, because the second you block a vent, it overheats, it gets uncomfortable to sit on. But I've for hours played World of Warcraft or video edited on these things. And these are the most impressive thermally managed laptops I've ever seen.
Are you a shaman, Gary, like William Shatner?
I am I've got two main characters, a Fury Warrior, and I'm leveling up an Affliction Warlock right now.
For
the Alliance.
Poor Travis. Gary, actually, I want to ask you this because I think out of all of us here, you probably review. I've seen you, Windows PC reviews and stuff like that. And I was kind of talking about this with Travis and Luke, kind of like last week. For the first time, really, in a long time, you have a choice here that you didn't used to have. If you bought a MacBook before, it still had an Intel chip in it. It's kind of like, well, what operating system do you prefer? Now, as someone who does content on both, Mac and Windows, the next time you go into a Windows laptop review, can you even recommend one based on?
Can you even? So that's
M1 chips.
That's a question I've asked myself, because the day before they announced these, I had just bought a brand new Razer Blade Stealth 13 which has a dedicated graphics card, had a pretty beefy CPU in it for an Ultrabook, and I immediately returned it because I don't know. The answer is I don't know, because I think Windows still wins in raw power, because you can get just monstrous GPUs in there. You can brute force better on Windows than you can on Mac. However, I built this custom PC that I've been using for 3 or 4 months as my video editor, just because that's where you get the performance in the way that I wanted it. But in the last week, I've wholly switched over to this MacBook Pro 13 because it gives me most of the performance. And like I said, I've already halved my storage. Even with this monstrous GPU, it cannot handle high efficiency files like this tiny little laptop that the fans I'm still not convinced that there is a fan in this laptop. Like,
let's tear it down right now.
It's just a ghostly spirit.
It's a fake fan.
I don't know how to.
What is it? Thermal active cooling
solution?
system.
Yeah, the active cooling system.
Yeah, and we have to keep reminding people these are entry level machines. They
Yeah.
we really shouldn't be talking about this going against your beefy Windows PC. So
These are the worst ones.
these are the worst ones. You can only assume they get better and better.
So
And
the thing that I've been wondering about, so I tweeted the other day basically saying, okay, imagine if Apple came out with a $1,000 laptop that had a Core i7 10750H and GTX 1050 Ti graphics in it, at least that level of power, but it was fanless and had 18 hours of battery life and barely produces any heat. Because that's basically what they've done here. I mean, you can give or take, but in general, as a metaphor, that's what they've done here. And that got me wondering, is there any Windows laptop that competes with that? Obviously, for $1,000, you can get a laptop with a Core i7 10750H. You can get that kind of performance. But I don't think you can buy a laptop that has that performance and battery life and build quality and is quiet. I don't think you can do all of those things. And that is what makes it so interesting.
Yeah,
Well,
you
also,
can't.
when you
I mean,
unplug it, it ramps down because it can't support that power draw.
Yeah, I was going to
it's
say that
on
when Gary
battery.
was talking. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, even the new AMD laptop chips are incredibly powerful, but they run incredibly hot, and they demand an awful lot of power. So you'll find them in like gaming laptops that are huge things that have fans louder than like the MacBook Pro 16 or even this desktop. So I don't think, and I know, again, I'm veering into the hyperbolic, the fanboy kind of mentality, but I don't think there's a comparable right now in the market. There's not a comparable thing to this because you do have to give up. Normally you have to pick, price, performance, or thermals. And here you kind of get all three, which is, I don't know, it's unique.
I want to get each person as we close up because we are coming to the end of this episode. But I think there's one thing that we've not talked about. We've been fawning over how great these products are, but there are a couple of things that they have left out. Obviously, the Mac Mini has less ports. The MacBooks can't do more than one display. Like, real quick, let's talk about those things that they've left out. And are they a big deal considering the steps they've made? Let's start with Greg, go all the way around, and then we'll start to wrap it up.
they are big concessions. I think normally the people who buy these types of machines aren't running like 3 displays at once. So, you know, the people who are out there who are buying a MacBook Air, most of them are never even going to connect it to an external display. The Mac Mini can run 2 displays. You have to use Thunderbolt and HDMI. That's less of an issue there. MacBook Pro, maybe you make the argument, okay, I really wanted a second display here. Yeah, don't get me wrong. These are great machines. They really impress me. But there are still limitations here, which does make waiting for the next generation worth it if you need that. If you're someone who's used to a 3-display setup and you can't make a 1-display work, well, then you're not going to want to get one of these machines. Like I said before, you know, you can't run Windows on them, right? Like there's a lot of Mac users who like that. That was actually a big question. A lot of people ask me, like, how does Parallels work in this? Because I need to run Windows as well. So those are still big bottlenecks that, you know, will they get solved eventually? I think so. I think the next bigger versions of these will probably be able to hook up to multiple displays. Maybe Microsoft gets Windows sorted out on that, but those are the issues I see for consumers right now. And there are reasons not to buy it, even though they are really great products.
What do you say, Luke?
I think I haven't heard, at least in monitoring my own comments, I have not seen a whole lot of people complaining about the Air in particular. I think the Air is pretty much universally, aside from a stray individual who has delusions of grandeur about what level of task they can use a base model MacBook Air for, I have not seen a lot of people really complaining about the Air. Most of what I've seen has been people saying, well, the Mac Mini seems like a regression with half the ports, less display support, less RAM maximum. But I to some extent, I do see that, and I think that's valid. However, I think that, and this is a totally harebrained conspiracy theory that I came up with and have no information to support, but this is just my hunch. I think that Apple is sort of perforating the Mac Mini in the same way that they have a 2 and 4 port Thunderbolt a 2 and 4 port MacBook Pro. I think they are setting up a low-end Mac Mini, and like the very fact that the Intel still is sticking around on the Mini and the Pro is basically a hint as saying, okay, this is not the end of it. There's going to be more. And so the fact that you can still buy the i5 and i7 Mac Mini with more RAM and that sort of thing, I think that clues us in that whatever the next tier of Apple Silicon will probably also be in the Mac Mini with more RAM, with 4 Thunderbolt ports. So I don't think it's a done deal with the Mac Mini. In my mind, the only real regression there, at least once all is said and done, is that the RAM is no longer upgradable. And that is regrettable, but predictable.
What do you got to say, Gary?
I mean, so I think I'm probably in a pretty unique position in that I don't consider myself a reviewer. I'm like an impressionist in progress. I just like to mess around with these things and then give my opinions. So from a technical standpoint, I have a hard time trying to find something that I think is worse, because again, my standard like thing that I recommend is the 2-port MacBook Pro 13. And the fact that the 2-port MacBook Pro 13 is right now something that can go toe to toe with actual machines, like it has the trifecta of everything you could need in a computer. And yes, maybe the display support is the one thing that I'd really say. And okay, all right, I fibbed. If they're going to give us 2 Thunderbolt ports, at least give us one on each side of the computer instead of
Agreed.
both right next to each other. But just every time I use the M1 computers, I'm shocked at just how good they are. Again, I do use a wide variety of computers in my daily life. I'm not a full-time YouTuber. Even in my daily work, I use Windows a lot, and we do software development, and a lot of that is fine on Windows. But long story long, I'm blown away. I could totally blown away by what Apple's done here.
All right, Rene, send us home.
All right. So quick story. A few years ago at WWDC, they put out a version of tvOS that temporarily didn't have Bluetooth keyboard support, and developers were complaining about it. And the answer was literally everybody in the world who uses that feature is here at WWDC. And by the time you get home, the next beta will include it. And I think that's just like a lot of the stuff you see on Twitter and YouTube is because we assume all of our use cases are the default use case. But these are the entry-level machines. Like we keep saying, these are machines nobody complaining about them would ever look at. They just happen to be the first new machines right now. So everybody's looking at them. And literally people did not remember that there were 2-port versions, that the MacBook Air only had 2 ports and there was a 2-port version of the MacBook Pro. These replace the Intel versions. And for me, it comes down to value. Across almost every vector, these provide more value than they did 2 weeks ago. For the same money or less, you are getting way more machine. And there's just an extra Mac Mini now if the other one was overkill for you. So I think there are limitations, but they are the limited systems. So I think in almost every way that matters, it's a win. And if you don't think so, then please, I invite you to wait for the version of the computer that's better suited for you coming soon.
Yes, indeedly doodly. What an incredible show we had today, ladies and gentlemen. We hope that you will check out all of these guys if you're not familiar. All of the links will be in the show notes.
I think the people want to know, Travis, is, are you going to order that Mac Mini?
I mean, it's the funny thing is, it was on sale for $30 off. So literally during the show, I was like, let me just go see what I think. And the $30 sale's off.
So we want to know when you're going to be on TV and where.
So literally, I was just about to say that's a good point. So it turns out a couple weeks back, I recorded something I'll be doing more of on a show called The List, which is syndicated across the country. Different times, check your local listings. There is a website that I'll post here in the YouTube chat for that, where you can look at times. Now, most of the times it's in the afternoon. On occasion, it's in the evening. And then depending on where you live, for example, if you live in Tallahassee, it's 1:37 a.m. So you may not see me. But and Boise, Idaho, 1:35. Hope you stay.
Will we be hearing the list? The list is Travis. The list is Travis.
No, I'm just kind of a tech person on there. I'll be on there from time to time. This one will be
Nice.
Tablet. So anyway, make sure.
All right, are we gonna see like a Gadget Cast shout out, like maybe like a special hand signal? We'll all get the reference.
Do you throw GadgetCast signs? Can we see you throw some
GadgetCast. That will happen in the next time that I record one of these. But yes, for sure, GadgetCast is definitely going to get a shout out.
Just don't get arrested.
For those of you that are watching on YouTube, hang tight. We'll do a couple of questions and answers before we shut it down. But everyone else, we want to thank Duke, Gary, and Rene for coming through and helping us out this week on the GadgetCast. So, of course, he's Greg, he's Luke, he's Duke and Luke, and he's Gary, and he's Rene, and I'm Travis. I'll see you next week. And we out. We did it. Yay.
Hooray.
Did you?
Nice.
And the quarterback is toast.
We did it. Okay, so we'll do just a couple of minutes of questions and answers just because a lot of questions came through during the stream and I want to make sure to give people an opportunity. Okay, what's the difference between Garg and Gary? Oof, that's a good question.
I don't know.
Is there a Gregory? Is there a
Great.
an amalgam universe version where they're the same channel?
Basically.
Okay, so what do you use to edit the podcast, Greg?
Logic.
Logic on the Mac. Is it?
You could probably just use GarageBand though. I don't really do too much.
Well, how long
Do you script silence?
How long does it tend to render these? Have you seen is it faster on the M1s? Just curious.
I haven't done one on the M1, so we're about to find out.
Oh boy.
Let's find out.
You got to bounce
that's
it like
exciting.
Jomo.
Yeah,
Well, yeah, but we need to do one of the high quality ones too. But I'll be really interested in that.
Yeah, test that out. Yeah, no, these ones render out super fast when we're doing like everything on one track. But when it's a multi-track, it's a lot lot. It's uncompressed.
So next week when we do it,
It take quite a while. They call it down.
cool. If Apple does not support eGPUs in the future, can external CPU chassis be repurposed for PCIe devices?
This might be controversial, but I don't think we're going to care a whole lot about eGPUs when Apple drops their GPUs in a couple of years.
But could you make it into a small hibachi if you wanted to do barbecue next to your Mac?
Now that's the real question, I think.
I always thought the eGPUs was a very like on Apple like solution, and I don't
it was
think
a step towards their VR thing before Johnny kiboshed it, and then kiboshed it. They was sort of like that awkward thing with them in Blackmagic, where they sort of stormed off into different rooms.
Well-known personality Sonny Dixon says, "Does anyone think AirTags will be out by end of the year?"
I feel like
I
some
think
would know.
AirTags are fake.
Fake
I've never
accessories.
seen
Hold
so much hype over a product that no one cares about.
I got a conspiracy theory about AirTags.
Uh-huh.
Does anyone
hear
have the HomePod Mini?
Yes.
Look at the bottom of a HomePod Mini. I saw renders for the AirTags. Looks an awful lot like the bottom of the HomePod Mini.
So the only thing that made me doubt the reality of the AirTags is that I don't think Apple would ever put BTLE in text in hardware on a device.
Interesting.
We saw leaked renders of AirTags, and I looked at the bottom of the HomePod Mini. And I went, "This looks like the renders of the AirTags." I wonder if someone just got like a CAD file.
Maybe they used them to make the bottoms. They ran out of bottoms, so they used the AirTags to make the bottoms.
That's a great conspiracy theory. Someone clip that for us. Maybe for the stream, we're using StreamYard for this. What phone are we all using? So I'm using the iPhone 12 Pro Max. What are you using, Greg?
I got my Mini.
Mini.
So mini.
Mini.
Pro Max
Max.
So Max.
in blue. Travis, I saw yours was blue, right?
That's right, baby.
Good
That's
man.
Yeah.
That's the way to
Blonde with
go.
My golden edges.
No, the Mini is the perfect phone.
Yeah.
I
This
also
is
have the
perfect
Mini.
phone.
I'm keeping the Mini as well. I've got that one within reach.
I'm a mini man. So
Mini
you
man.
can quote that.
I think
He's a
the Mini's going
Garg
to cut
and
the
Gary,
Max
same
open and use it
person.
as a winter coat.
Yeah.
Will Windows be canceled? No. Okay. Do you guys think it was wrong for Apple to update the MacBook Air earlier in the year while the much better one's already being worked on? This is actually a good question.
I don't know that. So I hated the 2020 MacBook Air because the whole, again, thermal performance is the most important thing. And if you're going to put a thermal system and then not connect it to anything, that's kind of like a jerk move. So I don't know. That is kind
No,
of
so I have an answer for that.
That's
because
been the
people
same
kept-
though
people-
since 2018. That wasn't particularly new. The only new thing with the 2020 was the CPUs and the Magic Keyboard. The thermal situation has been bad for a long time.
Well, so but with the thermal thing, like you only have to connect them if you don't know what your airflow model is. Like if you just want to be 100% dead certain and you don't know math, you connect those things. But if you've done any airflow modeling and it works, you can put those things anywhere in the chassis. And as long as your math works, it's not going to be any better putting them on top of each other. To me, that's just 10th generation Intel suctastosity in terms of the thermal envelope of that chip in that product.
I think
That's
it was
a new
designed. It
trademark
was
term.
designed for a smaller nanometer manufacturing process than they actually got. I
Yes.
think it was designed in 2018 under the assumption that the chips were going to get more efficient, and then they didn't. And it was like, oh well, all right.
I want to answer this specific question though. I don't think it was wrong of them to update it because was the 2020 had the new keyboard, right?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, the Magic.
So-
and also some people are going to want to stay on Intel even for a little while.
The keyboard was a very important upgrade to have, and I feel like it would have been worse to just keep selling the old butterfly version until we got these ones. I feel like that would be the bigger crime.
My understanding is they wanted a new version of everything on Intel within 1 year of going to M1 so that people who needed that option would have that option in a recently modern device.
Makes sense.
So here's my follow-up question to that, though. Where's the 16-inch?
It was last November, so it fell within their
just barely.
envelope.
But even though I definitely agree with that. But remember in the boot camp update, it referenced 16-inch MacBook Pro 2019 and 2020. So everyone was
Well,
like,
they did come out
there you
with
go
that
then.
one.
I wonder if
Maybe
they
the
looked at
new
the 10th gen and just said, this is garbage. We're not even going to do it.
That's what
Because
I've been wondering.
It is zero.
It's
It is
not
zero
worth it.
better. It is 0% better than the next
why
generation
change
in
it?
that chassis.
I think Gary had it. If you want to say it again,
Oh, I mean, they did come out with a new GPU. Maybe they considered that the 2020 16.
They don't. That one is still considered internally and on if you take it into the Apple Store and the boards, they are still considered 2019. It was the same thing with the Vega 20 graphics that came out like a month later. They were considered the same model. So I was thinking that too, but unfortunately, I think they legitimately just were like, nah, never mind.
I think the 10th gen was none more better.
Yeah.
You think we
It's
see
not.
SoC cards slotting into the current frame potentially where the old G5 slotted in?
No,
what?
That would have been so nice, though. That would have been such a gift.
it would have been.
Does Apple still use the Imagination Technology IP in their GPU design?
They have a perpetual license like the ARM IP, so they can, but I think they've moved more and more towards custom.
All right, let's see. Lower price. Okay, here we go. Lower price Mac Mini SE, the size of an Apple TV, when M1, when M2 takes over the spot. That would be crazy.
You seen how hollow that thing is now? It's basically an air cushion with a tiny computer inside.
Yeah. They should have made it more mini.
What do you
Not
think
more mini yet?
the Apple Christmas surprise is?
Well, it's
Is there
left to
one?
dream, so it's got to be a furry Apple Watch band.
Let's see.
That's an immediate buy.
First of all, you guys, how do you feel the new Mac OS version not being downgradable? Because I'm hearing iOS 10 servers, blah, 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 blah. So it can't downgrade. What do you feel about that?
On the M1 Max, I mean,
I don't
I
know
don't
why
know
I
if
would
that's
want to
accurate.
downgrade.
yeah.
But also, my understanding is if you turn off everything, it goes like you lose things like being able to run iOS apps, but then you can still run alternate versions of Mac OS. So that was at least true as of June. I don't know if that's changed, but that's in the, I'm calling it managed mode. If you're running it like managed mode, like a civilian, I think that's absolutely true. But I think if you go to pro mode, if you put in your Konami code, you might have more options.
Will all devices end up using M chips? Well, technically, if you're talking about like phone stuff too, no. Yes and no, right? Because
I think he means Max.
yeah, okay, so that's a good question then.
Different versions of M chips. Like, I don't think, the chips that are in, the MacBook Air, it's not going to be what you find on the Mac Pro or necessarily the iMac. But yeah, I think everything's obviously going to run on some version of an M chip, but there will be different versions.
If
I'm
there's
wondering
two
how
of them,
many.
will it be an M&M chip?
Any opinion on Big Sur performance?
I found it to be pretty stable. I was
I've
having
had no
some real
issues.
issues with Catalina in Final Cut, and I haven't had a single issue.
Yeah,
thus
I'm
far
still
with,
on
Big
my
Sur.
editing machine. I'm still running Mojave right now.
I upgraded to Catalina a couple months ago, and it was not my favorite.
Yeah, I couldn't do it.
Catalina's pushed me to Windows.
Wow.
That's no joke.
Wow.
I'm on Big Sur, and it's fine for me. I didn't have any issues in Catalina though, too. So I got a good streak.
PDK crashes on me every day.
Same question on iMac. Was it wrong for the iMac to update? Same question as before.
No.
I think same answer as before.
Yeah.
One more, a couple more real quick. Can you gaze into a crystal ball and speculate the single core, multi-core numbers for the six? This would be a Luke Miani thing because he actually was very accurate on his.
Yeah.
Dude, I literally lost my mind because I called. I think I was 0.005% off with my numbers that I came up with back in August for this chip. At least with respect to the Geekbench scores, because that's what I was talking about. So what I would guess is so the next Apple Silicon chip that's going to come out is going to be a 12-core part, and why that's important is because they're going to be doubling the performance cores. Most likely, it's possible that they could do 6 and 6, but I think it's more likely going to be 4 efficiency, 8 performance. And we already know that I haven't done the hard math, but we already know that the M1 has basically the best single core performance of any CPU you could buy. It'll demolish Threadripper, anything. 5 gigahertz, 10900K, toast. 8 of those cores is probably going to be toe to toe with Threadripper in a 45 watt package. That's my guess, which is ludicrous.
I understood about like half the words you said, but I'm excited.
I would feel if there's LTE support, which I would just say 5G support for the MacBook. I think, more is better.
It'll be
Easy
expensive
cop.
because they pay royalty to Qualcomm based on retail price of the unit, which is why it's $120 on the iPad.
Oofta. I can't tell if this is like his opinion or an actual like leak. With Sonny, you never know. Like, is he?
He probably has one.
With Sonny,
You never know.
We never know with Sonny. Like he might actually be just straight up telling us.
Yeah,
it's hard.
like it's sitting on my desk right now. This is what it looks like.
Yeah, so they were saying I think it's going to be the A14 iPad Pro. This was supposed to be I think end of this year, early next year for the next iPad Pro. I wonder if that's still going to be
March,
the case.
probably.
Man, I just need it. Okay, so I think one more. This one right here, and that'll be it. When you go beyond, that's not even a question. Probably a different scenario. They want iPad. Okay, real quick, let me check Twitter tweets and what is my.
No, I will say that I would like to point out if you're a viewer of mine, and a long time ago when we were first hearing about these Apple Silicon Macs, I made a thumbnail and I put M chip. I got the name right for the chips, and I have never, I go back. I remember putting that in there. And all the comments were like, it's not going to be the M chip. They already use that for the motion coprocessor. You don't know what you're talking about. So,
Funny how they stopped talking about motion coprocessors in 2017, the same year that they started really taking this seriously.
So,
Apple can call anything they want. It's like people keep forgetting. There's no way they're going to call it the iPhone 12. It's the iPhone 11. It's not a rule.
Yeah. The only thing that was a rule is, and that I think we all got right, was that there was no way they were ever going to put an A14X in a Mac.
Yes.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for the guys who joined us. We'll do another one of these super streams again. Actually, we still need to do the one across the other YouTube channels.
Well, I told Travis, I like to be transparent. Before the show, Travis and I had this discussion like, will this be good? Will it be bad? We're going to find out. And, if we never do another show,
it's
like
Everyday Dad.
Yeah. if we never do like a super show like this again, it was bad. But I think it was really good. I think it was fun.
I think
it would be great.
A lot of information. We'll have to see how the audio podcast does. Really interested in
zero downloads. Oh no.
I
just need Luke to make a video so Greg can make his version of it, so I can make my version of Greg. And then solid schedule.
All of them. How about that? All right. Well, anyway, thanks everyone for joining us in the live stream. You made this very successful. Over 100 people. That was great. We will see all of you next time. Peace.